I think the most important thing really is to be in the process of engaging residents, grassroots, the advisors, dialogue with them, taking on board as many of their suggestions and feedback as possible. Obviously, there are certain things that are very, very hard to change. Like, for example, the location of the shaft, the alignment of the tunnels. I mean, those things are predetermined where the stations are going to be. But the above ground works where we can realign walkways, make it safer, where lorries are going in and out and so on. Those are the things that we ought to do, taking into consideration some of what they hope we are able to do on their behalf. So that's something that we have to continue to do, whether it is for MRT works or whether it is for major road projects. Well, I've been on the job for about 2.5 weeks now. Been on a good number of train rides, both morning and evening peaks. Buses as well, both the morning and evening peaks. Obviously, I think for the trains, it gets you there faster, more predictable. Although sometimes it is not possible to get onto the first train. I have so far managed to get onto the second train, but I also understand that during this period, part of it is the school holidays and some people may be away. So I'll continue to take the train as well as the buses over the many months to come so that I can sample, I think, what are the most challenging and difficult hotspots and try and bring resources to bear to improve the situation. We talked about the downtown line, we talked about the rail master plan, all the lines and extensions that are going to be open every year from now to 2017, new trains that are coming in. My feel is really that the gestation period for rail projects and rail-related projects are very long. Getting a train in can take 3 to 4 years. Getting a new line in place can really be 7 to 8 years, simply because of the complexities involved. One of the great challenges that we have today is how to add significant capacity to the overall transport network, right? And bearing in mind what I've said about gestation period for rail projects, my conclusion is that we need to add significant capacity into the bus network, right? If left to the operators alone, I think they would take a relatively cautious and gradual process of doing so. So it is necessary for the government to work together with the operators so that we can inject this capacity in a very timely fashion, and particularly over the next 3 to 4 years before we see the materialization of the downtown lines 2, 3 and future projects. So we're really talking about buses. The second thing that I think we really need to do more of is data mining. Okay? Data mining that will complement feedback from commuters as well as our own observations on the ground as to where the hotspots are. Right? So data mining, for example, we today already have information on bus arrivals. So we need to be able to look at every route, any time of the day, and to know whether the headway timings are being met. The second area of data mining that we ought to look at in greater detail is information that comes about from the EZ-Link cards, so that I know at any point in time how many passengers, how many commuters are on board a bus. So that as a commuter, what I would like to see is, I would like to be able to have an application that tells me when the bus is arriving, which we have some of that today, but also to tell me in a very simple, maybe color-coded manner, whether there are seats on the bus, whether there's only standing room on the bus, or whether it is so crowded you're not likely to be able to get on board. And I say that because this was 2 Fridays ago. I was trying to take a bus during the evening peak hour from PSA building. So, and my usual bus is number 30. And this is a Friday evening, so it might not be applicable to all evenings, right? First bus came, double-decker, didn't stop. And you can see why. It's very, very crowded. Waited for the next one. They came quickly enough, to be fair, but it was a single-decker, also very crowded. Couldn't get on board. And then I decided maybe the better thing was to go to Harbourfront, take the Northeast line, go to Dhoby Ghaut, take the Circle line and end up in Dakota, where I wanted to go to. And so if you have information given to the commuter about when the bus is coming, are you going to be able to get on board? And you can't, you make you do something different. You find alternatives. So that kind of information, I think, is what a commuter like myself will be looking for. And we ought to be able to do data mining to the extent possible to help commuters make more informed decisions. I think today, we leave it very much to the operators to add capacity to the overall system. And we are mindful that sometimes it may not be at the speed necessary given the bottlenecks that we face in the transportation network. My view is that if you compare, for example, aviation and maritime, we tend to add capacity ahead of demand. My view is that probably for land transportation, trains, buses, we probably are adding capacity not ahead of demand, maybe not even in tandem with demand. With the former, there is associated holding and opportunity cost, but with the latter, if you don't meet the demand, there is a certain social cost associated with it. So we ought to be able to do better in this regard. And I think the way to do it is for the government to work more closely with the operators. Now, the details of how that ought to be done, at a subsequent stage, we will talk more fully about it. Putting my own experiences aside, what we need to do is continue to receive feedback from commuters, find ways to check it out, but recognize that these are only anecdotal information. More importantly, we need to be able to systematically find ways to pull out the right data so that we can look at which bus stops at what periods are the most congested and find ways to deal with it, including introducing empty buses midstream, all right, which will bring relief to a certain segment of the route that is most congested.
What other crucial changes do you have in mind?
Well, I've only been on the job for the past 2.5 weeks. I think it is necessary not to jump in and try and make changes in all different directions, because these are, I think, integrated pieces. They are connected, they have consequences, and we better understand some of the consequences before we try and make what we think are necessary improvements and far-reaching changes. But I think there will be other changes. It's just that it is useful, I think, to listen to what the commuters have to say, learn through observing from our own experiences, and then thereafter decide and lead what needs to be done.
We spoke about concessions, Facebook. Can you elaborate on what plans we have?
Well, I'm mindful that there are different groups, the elderly, the disabled, students like those studying in the polytechnics who are asking for concessions to be extended to them. These are all on my to-do list, although I would hasten to add that all of them are not something that I can do anything about immediately. Okay, I would say, especially mindful of the needs of the elderly. Okay, because many of them, if they could, they would choose to travel outside of the peak hours because it's less crowded. They would choose to do that if they could. But there are some who need to work, who need to go to their places of work, and as we encourage more of them to work for more years of their lives, they will have to travel during the peak hours. So I'm mindful of this aspect that affects the elderly, but I hope to have a number of years where I can effect changes in a gradual manner and make sure that I take all considerations into account before I act on them.
So, Minister, what is high on your to-do list?
Okay, we talked about concessions. One thing that's high on the to-do list, very, very high, is to find ways to add capacity, significant capacity to the transport system. And as I mentioned before, for trains, there's a long gestation period. We do need to buy more trains, we will build more lines, but it will take time to come into effect. All right? And so for me, buses will be a matter of high priority in the coming months.